What up, Morning Manna team? I am so excited to be with you for this coming week. I've been reading through my Bible. I know, shock, I read through the Bible. But earlier this year, as I was reading through along our Bible reading plan, I just started to think about the gap. And specifically the gap in Abraham's life, the gap from the promise of God until he saw in his own mind that promise fulfilled. And I think probably every one of us could identify with the gap. We've got this idea that God wants something for us, more for our marriage, something with our kids, something with our destiny, our sense of calling. But it doesn't happen yet. It's like God speaks to you and says, I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to be with you. This is going to work out. But you're waiting. And so in the midst of that waiting, in the midst of the gap, what are some things we should do? What are some things we should not do? And I want to look at the life of Abram, later Abraham. You could see this if you wanted to read through on your own time, though you've probably already read through it earlier this year. Genesis 12-ish, well, really Genesis 12, to about Genesis 23, kind of tell the narrative, the story of Abram, later Abraham, and his wife Sarah, and then his offspring Isaac, and of course Ishmael, and then there's actually some other kids after that. And in the midst of all that, I love exploring the do's and the don'ts from the same life. Sometimes when we look at the Bible, it's all a win. This guy did everything right. And so you've got 6 positive ideas from a narrative of how he walked with God. Abraham doesn't do it all right, and he doesn't do it all wrong. And that's probably true of you, and that's probably true of me. And so I love that we can see 3 do's and then 3 don'ts of living in the gap, the difference between when God gives the promise and we see the promise fulfilled. Here's the first do. Regardless of whether or not you've seen it yet, and God speaks, okay, here's what's going to happen. There's a place for you. There's a promise for you. There's always going to be that next step, and that is to obey. So my first do in the gap, the distance between when God speaks, when God gives you the promise, and when you see it fulfilled, is to obey. You've heard my dad say 1,000,000 times that the most faith-filled words, the 3 most faith-filled words in the Old Testament, so Abram went. Abram obeyed God. He left his homeland where it would have been easy, and he followed what God told him as he walked to the promise. Step number 1 in the gap between whatever your promise is and its fulfillment, obey God. God bless you. See you tomorrow.